Hi, I'm Matt O'Brien. I'm the Director of Research at the Federation for American Immigration Reform, and I'm here to talk about small migrant populations' huge impacts. When we think about mass immigration, we tend to think of the southwestern border states or states with large foreign-born populations like New York and Florida. However, the impact can be just as great, if not greater, in states with small foreign-born populations. Consider the 10 states with the smallest immigrant populations: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, West Virginia, Mississippi, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, and Alaska. These states have a combined foreign-born population of 415,000, of which 88,000 are here illegally. The illegal aliens in these states cost taxpayers $454,300,000 annually. But the inhabitants of low immigration states also have to shoulder other expenses connected with mass migration. In fact, states with small populations tend to experience greater effects from migrant influxes because such states typically have fewer available jobs and smaller economies, making it harder to absorb newcomers. Just because a state has a relatively small number of migrants doesn't mean that its labor market will remain unaffected. And it doesn't matter whether the aliens competing for jobs are here legally or illegally. Foreigners competing against U.S. workers for employment always has a negative impact on wages and the availability of jobs. Skilled migrants increase competition for more profitable jobs in places like North Dakota with its oil boom and New Hampshire, which has a growing service sector economy. And low-skilled migrants compete directly with Americans seeking jobs in economically depressed areas like Mississippi and West Virginia. Nowhere has this been more visible than in the falling wages experienced by agricultural workers throughout the country. American farm workers, ranch hands, and seasonal pickers have seen their wages drop by roughly 20%. That's a huge pay cut, especially for workers who are already at the lower end of the wage scale. And if you don't believe foreign workers have a profound effect on the wages of Americans in low-skill and entry-level jobs, here's a real-life example. In August 2019, ICE raided Mississippi poultry processing plants run primarily by Koch Foods. They arrested 680 illegal aliens and a number of other immigration violators. That may not seem like a large number of jobs stolen from Americans, but it actually constitutes 3% of all poultry positions in the Magnolia State. Poultry farming and processing is Mississippi's largest industry. Soon after the raid, Koch Foods hosted a job fair to fill positions previously occupied by aliens working illegally. The company received 200 applications from U.S. citizens before noon on the first day of the job fair. Americans who were originally left in the dust by greedy employers who broke our immigration laws to increase their profits. So much for jobs that Americans won't do. Americans with advanced job skills also have to compete with foreigners, mostly H-1B guest workers. Up to 25% of the 415,000 immigrants in states with low immigrant populations work in science, technology, engineering, and math fields collectively known as STEM. Mass immigration exerts pressure on Americans in other ways as well. Take education, for example. Many immigrant children have limited English proficiency, known as LEP. LEP students are one of the most expensive groups to educate. Indeed, FAIR found that LEP costs nationwide totaled $59.8 billion in 2016. Although the low immigration states that we're looking at have fewer LEP students, roughly 50,000 kids, they still spend $96 million per year educating them. Consider Lewiston, Maine, a once booming mill town with a depressed economy and limited resources. Over the past 15 years, more than 7,500 migrants have been resettled in the town. As is often the case, residents and city officials had no say in the resettlement process, and the public school system there crumbled as a result. And local teachers are still trying to find a way to instruct a student body that speaks 34 different languages and very little English. In fact, in order to adequately educate the growing number of immigrants being sent to the state, Maine will need to increase its number of LEP qualified teachers by as much as 110%. Mass immigration exerts pressure on Americans in other ways as well. Small rural hospitals are closing at a furious pace, but low-income immigrants tend to use emergency rooms for the primary care needs. Coupled with the physician shortages currently plaguing rural areas, that means longer wait times for Americans seeking treatment and increased competition for scarce healthcare resources in places whose medical needs are already underserved. Last but not least, increased numbers of immigrants in the states in question may pose threats to national security and public safety. While we usually associate terrorist attacks with big, populous cities, rural areas and small towns may actually be just as attractive as terrorist targets. That's because many rural areas lack the public safety resources to mount an immediate response and recovery effort. Moreover, the 10 states with the smallest foreign-born populations offer targets that are attractive to terrorists bent on maximizing economic and environmental damage: mines, oil drilling facilities, pipelines, and other industrial sites. Attempts to resettle large numbers of migrants in rural areas present a serious national security threat that should not be taken lightly, because so many of those migrants hail from countries overtly hostile to the U.S. and they haven't been properly vetted. With the federal government beginning to settle more immigrants in America's small towns and rural communities, how long will it be before Vermont or North Dakota experience the increased crime, overburdened healthcare systems, swamped public schools, and overwhelming government debt that currently plague places like New York and California? The answer is that it may be sooner than we expect, and those most negatively affected will be the U.S. citizens who live in states like West Virginia, which the Wall Street Journal has described as left behind by the nationwide economic recovery. I'm Matt O'Brien, and I'm the Director of Research for the Federation for American Immigration Reform.